Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to No More, No Less. I'm Michael Chikeen, and today with me in the virtual studio is Fiona Denmark. Fiona is a social worker, a resilience coach, and frequent keynote speaker. Fiona is also legally blind, and she's going to be sharing her stories of her experience with her disability and how she faces the world, embracing challenges and achieving so much. Her goal is to make all of us understand we already have the tools we need to overcome our perceived obstacles in life. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation. And so without further delay, Fiona Denmark, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I would imagine many of us are inherently curious about what it would be like to live with a disability like yours, but we would never dare ask someone to share their experience with us for fear of being rude or crossing the line. And so I'd like to start by thanking you for being so open and willing to share your, very human experience and journey with everyone listening.
I think the biggest thing to let people know is that being blind isn't always just as people would imagine it. So you just see darkness. There's quite a perspective and spectrum when it comes to being blind. And so to be legally blind, there's all sorts of special diagnosis that you've got to meet criteria for. But essentially, there's, even once you're considered to be legally blind, there's still quite a perspective in the sense that I've been legally blind all of my life. However, my vision has deteriorated from, what I would consider probably, quite workable. You may not have even realised that I had a vision impairment in many circumstances, right through to now where I've probably got less than 10% vision. But what I do see is all based around different light and contrast. So somewhere that's really bright, I can see better than somewhere that's quite dark. I can see sort of maybe large objects, but can't read things or see things in definition. And now mobility is quite a difficult thing, so I rely on either a white cane or a sighted guide.
Interesting. And before we get back into that and the beginning of your story, what do you think it is about your personality that makes it possible for you to, embrace who you are and use your disability to help inspire others? As I imagine some people probably have even more trouble, having that sort of resilience that you have.
Look, it took a long time. I think looking back now, I realised when I was quite young that I had the possibility to turn my life around. And instead of, I guess, feeling sorry for myself and feeling lost as to what to do with my disability, that I did have the potential to use my experience to help other people. However, because of the way that I'd been brought up, and I grew up in a little country town out in outback, so literally if you've seen the pictures of the red dirt and the kangaroos bouncing, that's right. pretty much what was happening, outside of the township where I lived. Wow. And so it was very resource poor. Our capital city was about 5 hours away to see any specialists, and so it meant that I kind of had to fit in and just get along with life as all the other kids had to do, and to adapt as much as possible. And because I was the only one that had that particular type of disability, it meant that I learnt to just kind of meld in and do things as much as I possibly could. And in some ways that was definitely an advantage because it built a lot of resilience and adaptability. But in some ways I guess it was a disadvantage because I never really thought about myself as different, or really took the time to embrace my disability for what it was and what power and special sort of talents it gave me that potentially other people didn't have. And it's only probably been in the last 5 years or so that I've really learned to embrace that and actually use that to really significantly make an impact in getting out there and making a difference, and to be sort of, inspiring people, and not necessarily because of what I do, but more so how I can show them to be.
That's really interesting. So you just said that when you were younger, you didn't consider yourself different than everyone else, and you think that it would have been better if you did. Because from my perspective, I would have thought that it was thinking that you're not different from everyone else that would have allowed for that resilience. But you're saying the opposite. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, I think, look, there were certainly times where it was blaringly obvious. I mean, PE class was a perfect example when,
Sure.
the curriculum says, well, we're going to play a particular sport that I was not able to participate in. And at that time, the system didn't facilitate individualized opportunities. It was kind of like, well, you do what everybody else does or you do nothing. And so
Right.
there were certainly times where I was disadvantaged, and there was a lot of workarounds that sort of had to be put into place. So having said that, it wasn't always just being like everybody else, but it was that whole concept of that herd mentality, like fit in with everybody, fit in, fit in, fit in, and do as much as you possibly can. And every time I couldn't do that, there was that level of guilt and that I guess negative sense of, oh well, this is a disadvantage. And it took a long time to actually get to the point where I turned that around and went, you know what, it is an advantage rather than a disadvantage to have a disability. But having said that, definitely, there was a lot of resilience that came from that journey along the way.
Wow. Yeah, because I'm been experimenting with an idea recently on self acceptance and the idea of acceptance in general over the situations we find ourselves with, the reality of our lives, etc. And that that experience you just told me really speaks to that point. Whereas when you're at school and you're trying to convince yourself that you're the same as everyone else, but you're always coming up against the reality of like, oh, I can't play that sport or I can't do that X and Y Z. Now I understand where you meant what you meant was like if you would have accepted that you are different, it's easier to accept the limitations that you have and also embrace the things that you have that people don't have, which is like I think how to say like an awareness of things that I would say most kids growing up don't have, and a perspective on life that some might likely never ever get to.
Yeah.
So that's what you said. The last 5 years has been like a journey of embracing.
Yep, absolutely. So, there was a good 40 years of me pushing back against the system and going, why don't I quite fit in? And just trying
Right.
my hardest. It's that whole, square peg in a round hole kind of thing. It's like I know that there's a disability and there's a reason why I can't do the things that other people are doing. But it was always that sense that I still needed to conform and to learn. And I think it maybe just came with age, was the fact that, hey, I don't have to conform. In actual fact, being myself and being authentic and using all of those skills that I've got actually makes me pretty amazing. And I don't have to do what everybody else is doing.
Oh my God. That extrapolates to everybody. Like that's such a huge lesson that like I think all of us growing up, especially in these school systems, like I'm originally Canadian, born and raised in Canada, so I think like the Commonwealth, I think there are a lot of similarities between Australia and
Yes.
Canada, even school system
Yeah.
wise. And
Yeah.
so like the school system really does cater to the middle. Like it doesn't cater to people like of higher aptitude, of lower aptitude, disabilities, and it's getting better now. But like I can imagine every kid going through that, and mind you, the teacher doesn't have enough time to, get to know every single student in those large classrooms. But like everyone's thinking, well, oh, I'm not exactly like the median or the average, then that means I'm weird or I'm not accepted. And where the truth is, like, all of us are different to a certain extent. Some people are more sensitive than others. Some are more creative. Some are more logical. Some have disabilities, and they have to learn to work with those challenges in different ways. And if we can all kind of like learn that exact lesson, in your defense, I think it takes us all 40 years to get to that lesson. Like it's so I wish they would teach kids more of that at school.
And I think, we all get to that point where, we get to, and sometimes, well, sometimes people do never reach it, but generally it tends to be as
Right.
you get older, the less you seem to be so worried about what everybody else thinks, and you find your own little niche. And I think, we are all different, and that is fabulous. Like, what is different about us is what makes us all so unique and work together, and we've all got different things that are our strengths, and we've all got such power when we work towards our strengths rather than worrying about all of the things that we can't do.
Right. Yeah, because I think, like, by definition of humanity, we're all going to be, have way more things that we can't do than things that we can. Like, we can't play all the instruments. We can't do it. We can't do all the things. Like, everyone just has a different path. So I completely agree with you. And there was, and speaking on different paths, I wanted to cover something I mentioned briefly in our pre-chat here. When I was on your website, I saw that you did all of these sorts of, like, adventure sort of activities that I know I personally wouldn't have considered a blind person doing. And honestly, I was already inspired to update my expectations on what others are capable of just from, like, scrolling through your website. I was like, what the hell? What? like like you were doing stand-up paddleboarding, which I'm a big fan of, the zip line, rappelling down a rock face, and the big one for me was bungee jumping. And, like, so I want to talk about that for a second, because so I've been skydiving, and yet I fucking refuse to do bungee jumping. I just won't do it. So I would love to hear, like, how that opportunity came up, like how you thought about it, and the whole experience of it.
Look, I can tell you, I did actually skydive before I bungee jumped, and bungee jumping
Amazing.
was a much more terrifying experience, just given that you're more in control. So, unless you're an expert skydiver and are going to flip yourself out of the plane by yourself, generally when you first do it, you're attached to somebody else, and somewhat of the
Right.
control is taken away from you. Like, I mean, I'm sure you could clutch the side of the plane and say, no, no, I'm not going. But essentially, if you're up there, the door's open, everyone's piling out of the plane, you're going too. So, having said that, you weren't really left with too much time to consider, because you kind of were with somebody else, and they, were managing the situation. And so with bungee jumping, literally you're the one that's standing on the edge, and you have to tell yourself, okay, you've got to jump. And
Right.
it is the biggest mind mess ever. And someone told me, like, don't ever wait until they count down. I think they counted from 5 down to 1. And they're like, don't ever let them get down to 0 jump, because then your brain just goes, ooh, well, now I don't want to do it because the time has now passed and I'm done. So I think I
Right.
left off at about, I don't know, maybe 3 or something. In between 4 and 3, I'm just like, okay, I'm out of here. I'm here to do it. I'm going.
Oh.
And yeah, look, I was hoarse for the next day because I screamed so loud. I think the
Yeah.
whole neighborhood
Well,
heard that.
I've done skydiving, and I was telling friends last night at dinner, actually, that, like, I've never been so scared in my life than the moments before I stepped off the back of that plane. And I was also attached to a guy, like a guy who's done hundreds of jumps. But it's funny. I look back now, and I wonder if my fear was even more pronounced because, like, I could see everybody jumping out of the plane. I could look out of the windows and see what I was about to do. Whereas, like you said, you kind of just relinquish control, and you'd be like, well, I'm on this plane, and when we jump, we jump.
That's
And
right.
like, because I was like every 30 seconds, I was looking out the plane window, being like, we're higher now. Oh, we're a lot higher now. And I was terrified before I jumped out of that plane. And so with bungee jumping, like, when you were standing up, did you ask people, like, okay, like, do I need to jump far out? Can I just walk out? Or is there any, like, was people giving you instructions for,
Yeah,
like, the best
yeah.
way for
So,
you to
and
launch
look, I
yourself?
must admit, my vision was a little bit better then, so I could actually see like, I jumped off of a bridge, so I could see the water underneath me.
Okay.
And it was like, okay, there's I can't really tell how far that is away, but there's water down there. Okay, cool, all right. And yeah, I said to them, I said, what's the deal? And they said, okay. They explained it like jumping off of a diving board. And I'm like, yeah, cool. And then I thought to myself, well, I've not done that either, so I don't really know what that's like. But anyway, the principle's there
That's
now.
great.
So yeah, so it was kind of jump outwards and down and just hope for the best and scream really loudly.
Right. Yeah, I swore a blue streak down that in the first minute of free fall and skydiving. I have it on video somewhere, and I'm just swearing for a minute. Like there's no other cohesive words that I'm saying. And how was your experience of bungee jumping?
um
Did you enjoy
yeah,
it?
yeah, I did. It's probably not something I would do again. And the thing that sort of tainted it a little bit for me, and I was told afterwards, was to kind of pull your knees back up into a crouching kind of position.
Mm,
So then it kind of makes you go upright while they're waiting to sort of, they come out in a little canoe kind of dinghy thing and fetch you.
right.
And no one told me that before I did it. And so you could imagine it's kind of like you're just dangling on the end of a pendulum. And so sort of
Right.
swinging backwards and forwards and sort of, round and round in a spiral kind of. And I remember looking at that lovely water and going, oh, what pretty coloured water. Oh, if I don't close my eyes again, I'm going to throw up in that water. So I think I'll just like hang here and wait.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, which I imagine is a common experience after you're dangling for so long.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So, yeah, so
Um,
not something I would probably put on the to do again list, but you never know. If I get the
yeah.
opportunity, I probably will.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think you're braver than I am. I think it's amazing that you did it, and I think like a lot of this is about like overcoming fears, like the fears of the unknown, of relinquishing control, which I think a lot of us can relate to. And so,
Mm.
like, I'd like to go back to kind of like the beginning, like the origin story, if you will, because I really I don't, thinking about our conversation today, leading up to today, I was thinking I don't think I really understand blindness, like what legally blind means, and some of the stuff you alluded
Hmm.
to at the beginning of the show. So maybe you can walk us through like. So you said you weren't born blind, and your sight has diminished over time. But
Hmm.
can you maybe walk us through how it was when you were younger, and what it was, and maybe help us understand
Hmm.
what that was like.
So growing up, probably look, there was things that I couldn't do just as a standard thing. So it's my retinas that don't work, and so essentially my brain just isn't getting those messages from the light coming into my eyes to convert it into whatever it needs to be turned into. So
Mm,
essentially, you've got two types of cells on your retina. As like your rods are the things that sort of help you see in dark areas at night time, differentiating colors, seeing gradients. So when you're walking down the stairs, that you can see that the sort of the stairs are all different. That part of that part of my retina has just been shot ever since the beginning, basically, and has slowly deteriorated a little bit more over time. But those type of cells never worked. So what I've got is called rod cone dystrophy, and so hence why the rod part comes first. Your cones are the other bits that let you do pretty much everything else. So it's your stuff to see in general. So reading, your general mobility, being able to see what's on the other side of the road, all of that sort of stuff. And those cells have slowly died across the years. So it's not ever been I wake up tomorrow and I can't see. It's
mm,
just been a gradual deterioration. And look, I think there's been times in my life where I've experienced quite severe stress, and I've noted a severe as like a difference in that deterioration. So I had I went through some depression and grief and stuff when I was a teenager, and I noticed at that time I kind of lost my ability to read everyday print and to then have to go to large print. And then, many, many years later, went through divorce and separation and all the fun things that go with that, and noticed at that time that my eyesight once again deteriorated along with a lot of other things in my health at the same time. And that was my key to going, oh, hang on, like my whole health is pretty icky, and my eyesight seems to have gotten worse as well. So I kind of just labeled it all to sort of, oh, okay, maybe that's all sort of, adds to the whole stressful situation, makes everything worse. So I decided at that point where I'm like, okay, well, no more stress. We're going to live a stress-free life, because if that is what makes the situation worse, then we'll try to avoid it. But I think also those times also related to significant changes in my life. So, especially around the time that I got divorced, I was used to doing, a standard family kind of, this is what you do every day. You've got a routine, you've got your systems in place. And then, of course, everything changed all of a sudden. And, maybe it was that I had realized that I wasn't so independent when I needed to go and do things by myself again, because I'd sort of, developed a system where I was working alongside of somebody else. And so, bringing up our kids and whatever else was all done as a partnership. And then when you have to go and do the shopping and all sorts of things by yourself, then suddenly I realized, oh, okay, I'm not as good at this as I used to be.
Oh wow. Okay. So you realized after that partnership had dissolved, you had to find out different ways to cope with those just everyday tasks. And do you find now
Yeah.
that because I believe you said you're married again now. So
Yes, that's
do you
correct.
find now that you've learned so much and you're consistently better at doing these things on your own?
I think so. And I think, look, just we're lazy as humans, to be honest. And so
Amen.
if it means that, I can hold my husband's hand and walk down the street rather than, be slower and walk around with the white cane and do it independently, then in most circumstances, I'm going to hold his hand, not just because I like him, but because it's easy.
Right.
And so, we are lazy as humans, but it doesn't mean that I can't walk down the street with like, by myself now. So I've made a conscious effort, I guess, from that experience of saying, well, you know what? In the worst case scenario, I still can look after myself. I'm just going to choose the situations where, I will make my life easier. But having
Yeah.
said that, it's not, it's not the end of the world if I don't have that help. So it's kind of,
Right.
a bit of a learning experience. And I mean, it was
Huh.
it was a really tough learning experience when, all of a sudden you're dealing with the trauma of a divorce in the beginning, and having to manage two small children and whatever else, and then all of a sudden, oh well, now you've kind of got to relearn how to do all of these things again. it
Right.
it was a very tricky situation, and it was kind of like, okay, well, you learn from these things and you say, okay, well, next time I'll make sure that I'm better prepared and make sure that this circumstance doesn't happen again.
Right. Yeah, that must have been quite scary during that time. Like you're going through heartbreak and all the things that, like you said, come along with the divorce, and then also learning like, okay, now I've got to step up and learn how to do all of these things all over again. And again, like all of these things are really potentially to extrapolate to a lot of people going through divorce and heartache and all these things that when you've been in a long-term relationship and and that's why I think like all of these experiences that like they're human experiences, and I think if everyone can learn that we all go through sometimes different versions of the same thing, like we can all feel like we're all just humans trying to figure it out in these giant meat sack bodies that we have all the time. And I wanted to go back to something you said, because you said when you were younger, you were reading, and when you went through some of these stressful experiences, you were reading small print, and then it went to reading large print. And so like again, I really don't understand blindness at all. I realize,
Okay.
because like I would have thought that like you just can't see anything or read anything, and then there's like blackness, and you already dissuaded me from that opinion, saying that you see shades of light. Like I walk into this knowing that I'm going to realize how much more ignorant I am on this topic, but it's really even further than I thought.
Mm.
so, like
And
maybe walk me through that.
yeah, so essentially, I mean, I don't. Interesting. Okay, so and interesting. I was an avid reader. Where I grew up, it was extremely hot in the summertime,
Mm.
and I've got extremely pale, sort of Scottish background skin, and so it was a choice to stay inside and read a book rather than go out into the 40-degree sunshine.
Right.
And so, as a young person, I used to read a lot, and I would get migraine headaches and all sorts of nasty eye strain things, but I loved it so much that I would just continue doing it. And then eventually I went, okay, well, this is not working so well anymore. I need to sort of start adapting and go over to something like audio tapes. But, in the school sort of situation, it went from having just standard photocopied handouts that everybody else was getting to saying, okay, well, now instead of giving me the same sort of printout on an A4 size piece of paper, maybe I need it on an A3 size piece of paper. So instead of having size
Oh.
10 font, I was needing to read maybe size 20 font. And then just gradually, by the time I was 30, probably reading anything was a bit tricky. And now, yeah, like, I mean, you can hand me the piece of paper and, you can have, one letter on the size of an A4 size piece of paper, and I'm going to struggle to see what it is. So it's just been that gradual deterioration. The other interesting thing is many people have an assumption that most people that are blind can read Braille. And in actual fact, that is not something I can do. So many people ask me, oh, what does that say? Oh, you can read the Braille on the lift or whatever it happens to be. And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, it's
Right.
just as much as a mystery to me as it is to everybody else. And I did look into it when I lost that significant amount of vision, sort of,
Mm.
when I was around 30 or so. I went, oh, you know what? Maybe I should learn to read Braille. And I actually investigated and spoke to a few people, and they said it's literally like learning a foreign language. So unless you have a plan to use it all of the time, it's like, learning French at high school, like, you're going to forget it. And so
Huh.
it's like, oh, well, I really don't have a plan to use it all of the time. So I'm probably going to not waste my time and energy on that. I'll just rely on technology getting better, which it obviously has across the years.
Yeah.
And that has been my savior in the sense that, so many things don't even need to be adapted to being specially accessible. So something like my iPhone, for example, like,
Hmm.
there's accessibility features just built into it. So things like, your text to speech just automatically is there now. And that's the case with so much technology that it's just developed to make my life so much easier.
Wow, that is really interesting in Braille because I guess for maybe children that are born completely blind and the only option is Braille,
Mm,
then it becomes yeah, like a foreign language where you learn it so early and so young
mm.
that you adapt to it, and then you have a plan to use it throughout your entire life for books, communication, whatever. Okay, wow. Okay, so like,
And
so now, for
and that
example,
was the same for me when you do that
mm,
comparison. I just thought of being taught to type when I was very young. So as an 8-year-old, it was the most boring thing anyone could have taught me to do. I'm like, oh really? Like, I want to go and do the other cool stuff that the kids are doing. Like, they're
yeah,
having a music lesson and I'm doing touch typing. But
right.
having said that, today, my gosh, it's the best skill I could have ever been taught.
Yeah, I remember in grade nine, I took an extra course in summer school before entering high school with some friends, and it was typing, and it really was incredibly boring. And but today, I literally use it every day, and I still see
Mm-hmm.
some friends that are like one finger,
Yeah,
and I'm like, all right, well, thank you, grade nine typing, for getting me down that path.
absolutely correct. Yeah.
And I guess so. And so right now, for example, like when you're looking at a screen, what can you see from our conversation on the screen? Like how much can you realize or not?
You're going to laugh at this, but I don't even have the monitor turned on.
Oh, I didn't realize. Like, because it seemed like you were looking at a screen from all of my other interviews.
Yeah, no. So,
Yeah.
um, essentially, I'm like, there's a little light on the camera, so
Yeah.
I've got a separate camera.
Okay.
It's not a built-in one, so I can see the little light on the camera.
Yeah.
That's all I'm using. I don't have the monitor turned on even.
Ah, okay.
So the
I
way I
see.
use the computer is
Yeah.
essentially imagine using your computer with the monitor not on, no
Yeah.
mouse connected, and so I use a keyboard shortcut for everything that I do. And
Right.
then I have a screen reader program that literally reads everything out. And so every function that I do on the computer is based upon using keyboard shortcut keys.
Wow. Like, yeah, like you said, I guess technology has come a very, very long way since, 20 or 30 years ago, where the options were quite limited.
Yeah. And it's not always easy and it doesn't always work. Like for my job I work for the Victorian Transport, and when I first started at the role I was working in the call center. So I had,
Mm.
maybe 10 screens open with different people's license and registration details and all sorts of things. And some of those systems weren't compatible with the special software. And so I had to get somebody to come out and create some special extra shortcuts that were customized. And that was really lucky that I had a really great and supportive employer that says, you know what, like, this onboarding process is potentially taking a little bit longer than what it normally would, but
Mm.
I was the right person for the job, so they said, okay, yep, we'll work with you. And yeah, that's sort of adapted along the way. And in actual fact, what I use now, I don't actually sort of need any of that customized stuff so much. But yeah, like it's great when it works, but when it doesn't, or when someone hasn't coded their website really well, so still
Mm.
often there's websites out there that have decided to use their pictures in alt text like SEO instead of actually doing a description of what their pictures are, or they've just coded links really poorly. Sometimes that is still a bit of a nightmare, but it's definitely getting better than it used to be.
Oh my God, I never would have thought about that. Because I've done SEO and more like internet marketing in the past. I had an agency and etc. And so yeah, we always think of these alt tags as a place to like have more SEO,
Awesome
to have the
SEO, but
better
if
ranks,
you've
right?
got 20 random words, that doesn't necessarily explain what that picture is.
Oh my gosh. I never would have thought of an application like that for why the alt text is so important, because it's
Mm,
important for the algorithms to show up, but if people are using it only for ranking, then it's doing a lot of disservice, well, also to the ranking as well, because everything's not coming up as
yeah.
intelligently as it should.
Hmm.
Well, those SEO masters, I'm going to go to the conference and I'm going to tell those fuckers that they need to get their
We
things
did.
straight. Yeah, yeah.
We just
Oh
crushed
wow.
everybody.
Yeah, you guys are all monsters. I think that you guys need to. Oh wow, that is really fascinating. And something you said before stuck with me, that over time when you were younger and you realized as you were going through stressful events or just getting older that you saw your sight deteriorating. And I'm wondering if some of the resilience that you obviously seem to have today has come from like some of those periods, because like, did you feel that there was like a sense of grief after every level that you realized that your eyesight was deteriorating, or how did you feel or view with that during that time? It must have been quite scary.
Yeah, at times, definitely. And I guess in some sense, I've always been fairly lucky in that I was prepared from quite young. Look, I mean, it took them a long time to get a correct diagnosis because what I've got is actually considered to be quite rare.
Mm.
However, there are a few things that are very similar to my diagnosis. And so even when I had the wrong diagnosis and they thought I had something more common, they're kind of like, oh, well, the likelihood is this, you're going to lose your eyesight sometime, somehow. And I'm like, okay. So I guess I always had that in the back of my mind, and it was always something that I knew. So there was never any of those disappointments where, I didn't get to 17 and decide, oh, it's time to go and get my learner's permit, and then realize, oh, well, crap, I can't do that. So it was one of those things where I was like, okay, well, this is what life is going to be like, and just live it by day and see how it goes. And certainly there's times where it's really frustrating and disappointing when you suddenly realize, well, I could do that before and I can't do it now. Just even things like looking at photographs and stuff like that. And as I mentioned, having to adapt reading books, for example, things that I did really enjoy doing. And now I feel, oh, okay, well, now I need to, do it differently. And it's not necessarily better or worse. It's just, it's now different. And there will become a day where I can't see the face of my husband and my children. And, that's going to be a whole grieving process in itself. And, maybe I will never get to see what my grandchildren look like. But once again, that will be something that I will get to do in a different way. And, I guess I look at the blessing of what I have had and the fact that, there's people that haven't had that level of sight that I have had. And, I know, what the colour blue is, and I know what a stormy sky looks like, and, those things that maybe would be very hard to relate to had I never had that opportunity anyway. So,
Right.
it's grieving, but it's also just reframing it, going, well, you know what? This is what it's like. This is a reality. So how do we flip that and turn it into something that's potentially not so negative?
Right. Oh my God, that's so emotionally healthy and wise and intelligent and all these things that really makes like your message and why I understand how your message can be so helpful as a resilience coach.
And don't get me wrong, there's days where I wake up and I'm in a crappy mood and I feel miserable, and I just
Yeah.
want to put the doona over my head and go, oh.
Right.
And there's frustration, definitely. And you think, oh, look, if I could only do something, whether it be it's going to take a long time to get to where I need to go because I've got to catch public transport versus being able to sort of, just leap in the car, or I've got to ask somebody for help. Oh, I've run out of milk, and now I've got to make sure that my husband's available to go and get the milk, for example, rather than, look, I could go on online shopping, but then I've got to wait for 3 hours, or, whatever it happens to be. Like, there's those situations where you just think, I want the instant gratification answer. And that is frustrating because we all live in this instant gratification world. And
Right.
often when you've got a disability, that doesn't work because you've kind of got to plan things out a little bit better to make it work for you. So,
Right.
there's definitely times where, that resilience gets tested, but, what are you going to do? Sit in the corner and cry? Like, you've got to get on with it.
Yeah, like, well, I don't know. I think I would argue that that's part of resilience because I don't think, in my experience, resilience isn't having a day where you have a bit of a meltdown, emotionally or otherwise, because like sometimes life just comes at us too quickly, too harshly, too unforgivingly, and I think it's only important that we kind of get back up after that meltdown, because I think eventually, if we don't accept that we're having all these feelings like fuck this sucks, today's the worst, then like I think it makes the future days harder because we're always avoiding these negative emotions. And it seems like you handle them probably better than most people.
Yeah, well, that's it. Those skeletons that you put in the basement, eventually they're going to come back out again if you don't do something about them.
Yes. Yeah. I was recently talking to somebody, and I used the analogy of like, putting all of these negative emotions into a dungeon and feeding this dragon down there. Because a lot of like, a lot of women aren't allowed to be angry. A lot of men aren't allowed to be sad and vulnerable. And I think we respectively put these emotions into that dungeon, into that dragon, and all that dragon does is just like breathe fire eventually, and ends up like coming up in like shitty reactions, poor behavior, and to ruin different relationships or aspects of our lives. But if we kind of like don't feed the dragon and we just let it all out one day, and we're like, listen, I'm gonna have a day today that sucks, and I'm gonna just dwell in it, and tomorrow I'm gonna get up and do my stuff. I don't know. I think that's What have you found? Do you find that that would be a better solution? I try to navigate these emotions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like, because the more you feed that dragon with pushing things away and avoiding them, eventually everything's all nice and, oh, come to my house. I don't have a dragon underneath. And then one day,
Right.
rah, out it comes. And it, has such potential to become totally uncontrollable at that point, and you can destroy relationships, and all sorts of really huge stuff happens because you've just sort of turned something into something massive where you deal with it little bit by little bit, like little bit, and it never has that potential for such big consequences.
Right. What a great point. Yeah, that if you're not paying attention to that at all, eventually like you're the one that's going to get burned by that dragon fire. But if it doesn't have any of that fuel, then it can't kind of ruin the other aspects of your life as you're just pretending that you're a positive person and everything's great. But like, I don't know, I think you can be a positive person one day and the other day you realize like, okay, today like life's kind of kicking my ass. I'm just gonna like I'm gonna go inside a little bit and be more insular. So like do you actually work with clients for coaching, or is it mainly speaking that you're doing now?
A bit of both, actually. So I do one-on-one client work. I'm not one of these people. I tend not to do the whole. And there's this whole coaching community says coach to the millions, and you'll make a fortune. And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily always hit home with people. Where if you have a conversation similar to what we're doing now, but with some more provoking questions that gets people to ask and answer sort of what's going on for themselves, it then creates that positive change and gets them out of that system of being stuck where they are right now. So yeah, that real sort of opportunity to help people one on one is, I find it really empowering. And I think part of what I've learnt from my own experiences gives me that opportunity to sort of do that one-on-one work with people and hear their stories and really sort of work with them to uncover what it is that's stopping them from essentially achieving their dreams. And so then I guess my other angle is that by the keynote speaking, I've got the opportunity to then tell my story to the horde, and
Right.
to do that larger scale influencing on getting people to potentially change their mind about disability and their own resilience, and what their unique gifts are, because we've all got them. And for me, uncovering that ability to help others by my own experience was my epiphany moment. But we've all got things that we love to do, the things that make us happy, the things that sort of make our heart shine. And sometimes they're things that we did in childhood and have pushed back in the cupboard and said, oh no, I shouldn't do that, like I've got to get on adulting with my life. But in actual fact, they're the things that you really loved. And if you can bring some of that into what you do on an everyday routine, then that's going to make you a much more pleasant person, just in the way that you behave, the way you interact with others. And it's a nice legacy to leave. What do you want people to say when you die? Like, oh, this person worked an 80-hour week and they were really grumpy and worked hard.
Yeah.
No, it's like, no, they lived life. They did the fun things. They did all the stuff that they really enjoyed doing, and they shared that experience with other people.
Wow. Yeah, because I've been starting to think that we are all just children with more responsibilities when we get older, and we tell ourselves these stories that we can't do these things, or I shouldn't because I'm an adult and all these things. And like I had one of these moments yesterday. Actually, I was at the gym, and I was about to go to the locker room to get changed, and I passed one of like the exercise room areas, and there's like a see-through glass, and you can see what they're doing. And there's one woman in there looking at a screen and doing like a dance routine. And I was just standing there, just like smiling at her, like not at her, like she's looking at the screen and I'm looking at her dancing. And I was just kind of like, it just looked like so much fun. And in the moment, I had to tell myself, like, you want to do that? Why don't you just go do that? Do it for one of the songs. And I walked in, and I just stood beside her and I just joined in the song and I did like the choreography for like 3 minutes, and like she's laughing at me trying to do it and I'm having a great time. And then like, so I only did the one song. I didn't continue going it, but like I went home and I was like, I'm really glad that I followed the joy that I
Yes.
found in that moment, and it made me proud of myself. And
Fabulous.
it really came up when you just said that we think like we have to be adulting all the time, and instead of
Mm.
just embracing our kids and or like our inner child and what we can and cannot do.
Absolutely. And it made you happy and it made her happy. And, like, how often do we stop ourselves in that moment and go, no, I can't do that? Like,
Yeah.
we're only, what, you only live once. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's get out there, do it. Like, people think you're a bit silly, then, so be it. Like, if you're having fun and no one's getting hurt, then great, do it.
And honestly, fuck them. What's a,
Pretty much.
or what's the better term of like do you guys, is that UK? Do you guys say sod off, or is that just British?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's British.
That's British, all right. Yeah, it can, because just the idea, I like to say like I can't or I shouldn't
Mm,
is such a limiter. And I've been thinking about this about you, like you and client work as well before this call, and I imagine like working with a coach like yourself that has like a real life impediment, like the loss of sight, and has a real reality sort of perspective. I wonder if it makes your clients face the truth of their own limitations more quickly, because I think I would imagine on a coaching call talking to you, somebody says like I can't, maybe puts it into more perspective of how silly that word is.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And the old coaching line to that is, if you could, what would it look like? And
That
that's
is
the
a great
thing
line.
is, and I worked a lot and I still do work with other people with disabilities that are looking for, employment. And that was the thing is, oh, well, I can't get a job. Well, you can get a job. Like, your own limitations are what's stopping you from getting a job. Like, it's
Oh,
possible to have a job. And
right,
then they're like, oh, but, and I'm like, hello, what are we doing here? Like, this
right.
is my job and I'm helping you. So therefore, it's not, it's not unrealistic to have a job when you've got a disability. It's that, maybe there's a different way of going about it, and you've got to have some different skills, and you've got to have a supportive employer, and, there might be, different things that need to line up. But having said that, it's not impossible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Impossible is a very strong word. I can't or I shouldn't is in a completely different category. And I really love that question that, well, if you could, what would that look like?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I need to write that down and just think about it, because even now I'm trying to write a nonfiction book myself, and like every time I sit down at the keyboard, like I feel like I can't, and like I'm always doing this negotiation with myself, being like, you just have to write. You don't ever have to publish it, but you just have to write and finish this thing, and then
And
you can like turn off the judgment that says you can't or you shouldn't or you're not worthy, and just do, like, because it's not impossible. It's not like I'm
mm,
trying to fly.
yep,
You know?
yep.
Oh, that's
And you know
tremendous.
what? Like, at the end of the day, if it's crap and you've got to edit the hell out of it, who
Yes.
cares? Like, it's on paper and you've got it out of you. It's a product now, and then you can work with it as much as you need to finesse it and do whatever it is that you choose to do with it once it's actually out. But, to get it from inside of you out onto sort of something that you can then work with,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's just tapping into that. What made you want to write that book in the first place? There was something that encouraged you to do it. So every time I can't happens when you sit in front of the computer, think about why you're doing it.
Yeah. 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 'Cause I've also realized, even with like business projects and other things in the past, like I realized me getting from 0 to 1 is the hardest part.
Mm,
Like, because it's such an abstract mountain in my mind, was
yeah.
where if I actually start it, then I'm able to manipulate it and see what I like and don't like. And so like
Mm,
I keep that memory that idea really close to the front of my head, because the fear monster starts to take over sometimes, and I can't let that jerk wrestle with some of my ideas because he never lets it go. Like, talk about a dragon. Oh my God, to get that thing. So like, what are your plans for your coaching practice now? Like, it seems like you have a grip for what you like and don't like about different aspects of working, and yeah, I'd love to hear what your plans are.
Yeah, so really love doing that one-on-one work, and we've got the possibility of the world at our fingertips. So, it's working with whatever clients come my way and clients that I gel with. And it's this the big problem, sort of, I guess, when you start doing this kind of work, in the sense that, oh my gosh, it's a client. Any client will do. Anyone that's breathing will do. That's a client. And now it's like, well, no, like I've got some sort of, basic classifications, in the sense that that person must be ready to make a difference for themselves, because that old adage of, you can lead the horse to the water but you can't make him drink, is so true when it comes to coaching. Because I will ask you questions, I'll get you to do stuff, I'll get you to, I'll provoke you, I'll get you to do homework, but unless you're willing to do any of that, and you don't have that ability to self-reflect, and you're not there yet, then it's just not really going to work so well.
Hmm.
And the other thing is that there has to be a personality fit. And I think, if you've got a personality fit with somebody, then coaching becomes like sort of somewhere in between having a counselor and a best friend. It's like, sort of, it's still an official relationship, but
Hmm.
it's someone that you can relate to. And, you don't necessarily want your counselor to be your best friend, but, you need your coach, I think, to understand you and have that rapport. And so
Yeah.
that's really what I'm looking for in coaching clients. And those people will find me, I'll find them. It's all a bit of an organic process. And in the meantime, the keynote speaking is, I guess, my primary focus. Just being able to sort of, get out there and share and experience, and to see the change that I can, influence in people by, talking to them for 20 minutes, and they're like, whoa, okay, I've learnt so much and this is really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about just going with the flow. And I'm actually going to follow in your footsteps a little bit, and I'm in the process of starting to contemplate writing a book. And so that's the next big adventure, is putting those teenage years down onto paper, and giving it a little bit more depth into what that whole experience was like.
Very cool. Yeah, if you ever want, send me an email, because I'm using a book mentor or a book coach in South Africa right now, and they have like writing sessions every Wednesday, and once a month they have like a writing weekend, and everyone's just together on Zoom and check
Oh,
in and
awesome.
check in together like once every hour to have a bit of a chat as we continue writing. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's
if
really fabulous. And it gives you that accountability as well, which is great.
totally. Yeah, like there's different things. Like, I'm having a hard time incorporating the data with my stories, and I was really really struggling to get through some chapters because I'm just not good at that. Like, I'm trying to do the research, but it's just not a
Mm.
skill set that I have yet. And so asking people in the group, what resources can I use to get better at it? How much does it cost to hire an editor or a journalist? Like, all of these things that, like, by myself I just can't figure out. And I think a lot of times we think we should be able to solve the problems in our head by what's already in our head, and I don't think
Mm.
that's possible. I think sometimes we need like fresh air into our minds, and advice from people that have gone through different things. And so that's why I would say, anyone that's listening to this, if they're looking for like a resilience coach, I think you would be an excellent candidate for a coach, because the things that you've had to struggle with, I think, are very, very tangible, very dire at sometimes, and you have to find a way to reframe, to be kind to yourself, to accept yourself, like all the things that I think all of us, we have to learn to incorporate into our lives. But you were
Mm.
kind of forced to over time. And yeah, that's why I love that that you share your story. As soon as I saw your profile on that matchmaker site for guests, I'm like, 100% yes. Like this is exactly the type of person I want to give more voice to. And
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
wondering, I have one very dumb question to ask you though.
There is never
Ha-
a dumb question.
Well, let's wait till the question comes out first before we just that. So, and this probably comes from me watching too many superhero movies. But so having one sense impaired, does that heighten other senses? Because it's particularly interesting because you said you've had a degradation of your sight over time, and so I'm wondering if you felt like other senses have gotten heightened.
Yes, I'm putting the X-Men powers out there at the
That's
moment.
the spirit. Yes. Now we're speaking the same language.
Look, yeah, I think definitely, I guess my brain had this opportunity to go, oh, well, I can just have a nap and not use that huge part of, your capacity that goes into that visual stimulation. Because, I mean,
Mm,
it's probably the way that most people operate as their highest way of collecting information is through that visual aspect. And
mm,
so my brain could have just gone, oh, I'm napping now and I don't want to do anything.
huh,
Or, I think those neural pathways have just reformed and gone, oh, okay, well, you know what? I am going to continue to be useful and I've got an excessively good memory. It's not photographic by any stretch of the imagination, but I can tell you any conversation that I had 6 months ago. And I had a friend the other day and I was like, oh, this situation that happened with your mum and your daughter and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I don't even remember that happening. And I'm like, well, you told me the story. And she's like, okay.
wow.
So, good memory, excellent hearing. I think my kids hated it when they were little. They could never get up to any mischief. Mums have always supposed to have eyes in the back of their head, but,
Yeah,
I had extra, bat sensors or something. I don't know.
that's great.
So,
So what you're telling us all here that you are a superhero, that you do
yeah,
that you're
yeah,
just not
pretty
telling us.
much.
Okay.
Pretty
Gotcha,
much, yep.
gotcha.
Yep. Make cups of tea in the dark, all of that cool stuff, Saves on the electricity bills, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I guess I want to be respectful of your time. It would get close to an hour. So I guess on a last note, I'd wonder how you can explain if a client were to work with you, what they could expect from the experience.
Um, I think it'd be fun. It's pretty much, the as I said, the way we converse now is what you're going to get when you work with me as a client, just in a little bit more sort of, provoking kind of question answer sort of style work. Um, I'd be asking the questions instead of the other way around. Having said that, I think it's about being ready to change, being identifying what the things are that are stopping you from changing, or the things that sort of, sometimes we've just got so much crap that we've just built up over time, and all of those negative beliefs and those things that we think are true, in actual fact they're not, because all of us have the opportunity to take any situation and be in control of the way we are reacting to it. But that in itself is really difficult for people to get their head around. And so just to
Right.
have that support, that accountability, and, that person that you can just say, hey, look, I'm thinking this. Is this like totally unrealistic, or is this a possibility? And it's like, well, yeah, of course it's a possibility. You've just got to work out the steps to make it happen. Let's do that together.
Right. That's great. I really want to emphasize, I've really like, I think a lot of times the people we speak to, the people we bring into our lives to either give us counsel or that are romantic partners, they really can be a genuine mirror back to ourselves for the things that we're saying. If the person we're speaking to, lives their life also as a very honest and high integrity. And so you're definitely one of those people that I can tell. And so I would challenge anyone to work with you and to try to say, oh, I can't join a salsa class, or I can't do this, and not feel like an asshole. Because there's so many things that, like, the word can't is like, you say, like, oh, I I couldn't see the screen if I turn this on, or I can no longer read. Like these are can'ts. And so I think like someone trying to bullshit themselves to you, I think would provide an excellent mirror for personal growth, because you're going to feel like a real dick. And I think it will force people to be more honest. And isn't that what a coach is supposed to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And there's a big difference in between I can't or I choose not to. And
Yes.
so many times we choose not to. It's not that we physically can't.
I have so many post-it notes I'm going to need to put up after this call. That's like, it's not I can't, it's I choose not to. It's not I can't get up at 7 every morning. It's I choose not to. That is me. That is me right now. Oh, so Fiona, thank you so much for your time, for your courage, and for sharing your story with all of us. And for me, I've gotten a lot out of it, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you did enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.